my mouth and the meditations of our hearts be acceptable to you, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. Such a powerful gospel. In this gospel, we reach a point that Malcolm Gladwell, you all have people read his book? Malcolm Gladwell might call a tipping point. A lot has happened and a lot's to come, and this is the moment when things change fundamentally. This is the scene that moves us in the book of John from what is often referred to as the book of signs into the book of glory. It moves us from the time of Jesus' ministry, healing, and teaching to the passion, to betrayal, death, and finally to resurrection. And fittingly, next week we will move to Holy Week. We'll begin Holy Week. Accompanying him in this pivotal moment and central to the story that unfolds with the raising of Lazarus are his 12 apostles and his disciples and dear, dear friends, Mary and Martha. Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. And Mary was also clearly known as a figure in the early Christian church as the one who anointed the Lord with perfume and wiped his feet with her hair. This reference that is given in John is made not for people in that present moment, but for the people in the early church reading it, because that moment actually comes a few days later, right? But that act that she did was so powerful, so profound, that people can identify her. Oh, that's the one that did that thing, right? Not that she's already done it, but she's the one who did that thing. It's a reference point for the hearers of the gospel who are familiar with the characters because they've heard these stories over and over again. And it is with these dear friends, these faithful disciples, that Jesus performs this final of his 7 signs, the signs that began with the changing of water into wine at the wedding at Cana. And it's also where we hear the powerful and I think kind of the most enigmatic and central of his I am statements. There's a whole bunch of I am statements in John. I am the vine, I am the truth and the light. And this one is, I am the resurrection. I don't just cause it. I am the resurrection and the life. When Jesus and the followers who are traveling with him hear that Lazarus is critically ill, they are, at the estimation, if we look at sort of the geography of that area, around 15 difficult and arduous miles from Bethany, a good hard day's walk. And often we talk about why would Jesus have waited those 2 days? He does say this illness does not lead to death, rather it is for God's glory, which echoes the story of the blind man he healed in the Gospels we read last week, that he was not blind because of sin, but because of God's glory. But we ask, why would Jesus wait? Why wouldn't he rush to Lazarus' side, stop his death, rush to be with his dear friends Mary and Martha? After all, we hear both Martha and Mary say, Jesus, if you'd been here, he would not have died. But let's do the math. Yes, I can do some math, even though it did take me a little while to puzzle this out, though. So given the time that it takes for that messenger to get to Jesus from Bethany, that's a day. And then Jesus waits 2 days. And then it takes them another day to get back to Bethany. And how long has Lazarus been dead? 4 days. So it's highly likely that when the messenger arrived, Lazarus was already dead. And Jesus knew that. So why wait 2 days still? Because you think, oh, you want to rush, and it wasn't because he was afraid of the Judeans stoning him. We know that because he goes later. He says it's for the glory of God, and he knows the faithfulness of his disciples, Martha and Mary. Here's the thing. According to the Jewish traditions of the time, it takes 4 days for a soul to leave a body. 4 days. The very day that Jesus arrived. The day that Jesus performed this final miracle, and the one that gave his prosecutors the excuse to nail him to a cross in the hot sun of Golgotha. So when these two sisters both cry out in their time, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. Is it a cry of, you should have gotten here sooner? No. Or is it a testament to their faith? They know he could not have gotten there on time. And yet they still, in their grief, have ultimate faith that the Messiah could have saved Lazarus, and that is a comfort to them. But now, 4 days later, when the soul has left the body, when the body has begun to, as Mary so bluntly points out, to stink, it doesn't occur to them that he can raise their brother, his dear friend. So Jesus then maybe has come back to mourn with them, or so they think. And he becomes so human in this moment with his trusted friends. He weeps. He feels emotionally fraught, greatly disturbed, and for so many reasons. It's hard to know, but is it that it's necessary, this suffering of those he loves the most, this remarkable raising of the dead to show once and for all that he is indeed the Messiah? Is it his own knowledge of what will come and what his people will lose? So many things wrapped up in this moment. But what's important here is that this is the moment where he shows that he is the one. He is the Messiah who will raise the dry bones we heard about in Ezekiel, the prophecy, the one who will raise Israel, the one who is the Messiah. And even his most devoted and faithful followers, his dearest friends, are unprepared for what he does next at the tomb, for those 3 commands. Take away the stone, Lazarus come out, and unbind him. It's unthinkable. Even more unthinkable than curing a man born blind of his blindness. We're so used to this story 2,000 years later that it can be so easy to gloss over how absolutely astounding, disturbing, and revolutionary this act would have been. Jesus has raised a body whose soul has left it. And what does it say in Ezekiel? I will put my spirit, into these bones and raise them up. That this is Jesus putting life back into this pile of what is now essentially dust to dust, ashes to ashes, and giving it life, bringing it back as Lazarus. A body that is dried up, that is lost, hope is lost, cut off completely. This, more than any other of his 7 signs, is a clear sign, a clear statement, and a sign is, this is what they're talking about in the prophecies. You shall know that I am the Lord when I open your graves and bring you up from your graves, O my people, says Ezekiel. I will put my spirit within you, and you shall live, and I will place you on your own soil. Then you shall know that I, the Lord, have spoken and will act. pretty clear. Jesus waited 2 days, knowing his faithful would be worthy witnesses to God's glory. That surrounding himself in that crucial tipping point when he became known once and for all as the Messiah, the one who could open graves and bring the Spirit into the dead with those he loved, those with whom he could weep, and those who, as the story tells us, would tend to him and his followers in the last days. Those 2 women. And we move now into the Passion, into the Book of Glory. Much of it's not pretty, not pleasant, as life often is not, and we shouldn't forget that. But here is Jesus with us, again in the midst of it. In our faithfulness, he asks our trust, a difficult and demanding trust, to do the things that we without him would not have considered doing, and also to be witnesses to those things, to take away the stone, to consider what are the stones that hide the things that we as a culture, we as individuals, families, communities, that we've given up on, that stink, the dry bones of old battles. Lazarus, come out. What beloved, beloved parts of us, parts that we have put the stone over, parts that we think have died, need to come out. Unbind him and let him go. Who do we need to unbind for the glory of God? Because there's a lot of people who are bound, people we need to free, even as we fear, as I'm sure those people must have very much feared the rising of Lazarus, right? Even those we fear in their exposure to the sunlight, for what they'll say about us, what they'll say about themselves. This is the glory of God. This is what we've been preparing for. This is the tipping point. And we are the faithful disciples. We are the witnesses. Amen.